When you walk a 2,650-mile trail, you collect more than just miles. You gather stories, stories that weave together at trail crossings, campsites, and mountain passes. Welcome to Pretty Good at Talking, the companion podcast to Pretty Good at Walking. I'm Vince Strawbridge, and while the book I wrote tells my family's journey from Canada to Mexico, this podcast steps inside those moments we shared with others along the way. We'll sit down with remarkable characters from our trail story to hear their stories and their side of our shared adventures. Today, we'll be sitting down with Jon Schwarze, trail name Airborne, who had the distinction of becoming the 6th ever yo-yo hiker. What is a yo-yo hiker, you ask? That means Jon started walking from the Mexican border all the way to Canada, and when that wasn't enough, he turned around and walked all the way back to Mexico again. Jon played an important role in our 2018 through hike of the Pacific Crest Trail. Welcome again to Pretty Good at Talking, where we share what really happened out there on the trail. All right, everybody, we're here with Jon Airborne Schwarze, who hiked an interesting hike the year we were on trail, and played no small role in our experience of the Pacific Crest Trail as a family. So it's really fun to have him here with us today. And take it away, Jon. Tell us a little bit about yourself first before we move into the trail story.
I'm a youth soccer coach in Southern California. I had been backpacking for years. Started off by just doing short things, go 8 miles in, then camp for 3 days and come back out with heavy stuff. I got a dog. My dog started extending my adventures because he wouldn't get tired and he would get restless. And then eventually I started doing longer and longer trips in the Sierra, just not on major trails, just kind of picking my own stuff off maps. And and then ended up doing a PCT, and ever since then, kind of just been doing
yours was
stuff.
Yours was an interesting PCT journey, not like most. Was it that way in its inception? Like, is that what you came up with right away, or?
Yeah, I yo-yoed the PCT, so I did it in both directions in the same year. But I just logistically needed to do that for work. I had to take the full year off work. So I was just thinking, well, logistically, it's been my first long through hike. It would logistically be a lot easier and financially easier if I just turned around and came back instead of kind of just sitting around for 6 months. So I decided to go for that, not really at the very beginning realizing how rare of a feat it was, I guess, at the time. I'd heard about it just from Scott Williamson, not from him, but just about him. He's a guy who's the only person to yo-yo twice, and he's done the PCT like 14, 15 times, and used to hold the speed record and stuff. And so I just thought, give it a shot, and let's see what I could learn on the first half, and then if I could implement that in the second half, and kind of then kind of turn on the jets and go a little bit faster and kind of apply what I had
And most
learned.
of your training or pre-hike stuff had taken place in the Sierra. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much all of it. Few things in Los Padres here locally in Southern California, but for the most part, it was just like summer trips in the Sierra. And then part of my training was I started like a field lining business for like youth clubs the like 6 months before my trip. And basically that paid for the trip. And I was like walking like 10 to 15, 18 miles a day, pushing a big 100-pound heavy wheeled painting machine around as part of my training. So it was kind of like paid training I couldn't get out of because it was work. So I couldn't flake
Well, it
home
sounds
for
like
the
you were
day.
training the same way we were training flat.
Yes, for the most part. Yeah, like I would get out on some hikes and stuff, but I was more just kind of grinding. I was really busy working, 6, 7 days a week during the soccer season.
Yeah. So you just said a year off and I'm going. How did everyone respond when you pitched this idea to them, friends and family and the like?
It was kind of like a mixture of like you're a little crazy, but then also like sounds about right. So it didn't seem, a lot of people I played with had said like, you know, this is something that's like right up your alley. I was a very like hard-nosed player, Like I never gave up. I always kept going to, I'm making the overlapping runs in the 85th minute, just running people into the ground, trying to just get every advantage I could and push every, I guess, natural advantage I have, which is kind of that ability to just push myself to the
Yeah,
brink.
yeah, yeah. I'd say I
So,
was an endurance guy too. In soccer, I was not nearly the best on the field for the first 70 minutes, but the last 20, I had a little window of potential that I know
yeah,
didn't have at the beginning.
yeah. When you see that guy getting tired, that's the time to push, and that's kind of like how I am on trail, where if someone I use these like arbitrary goals where if I see somebody like up the switchbacks ahead of me
Mhm.
and it looks like they're struggling a little bit, something in my head is like now is like the time to, if I can push, I could probably beat them. And like when other people start to struggle and get tired, it's kind of like kicks me into gear and it like lets me know like, you know, I don't know. I was always saying this thing in my head of, let's say realistically, only 10% of the people actually complete the trail without, skipping major sections. Well, if I'm going to do it twice in a year, what's that like 1% mentality that I'm going to have to do that twice in a row? If I'm going to be 10% of that 10% to make it all the way back, then it needs to be like steadfast and like bad days come and go. You just keep pushing, you work your way through it. And unlike a game where there's a competitor against you, as long as you do not give up and you keep going, you're going to win. And so I, through all the adversity and little niggling injuries and stuff I had, I just always kind of kept that in mind of like, giving up's not an option. Like I told everybody I was going to do this for a reason because once you kind of vocalize it to other people, it doesn't give you that ability to kind of backstep and go, oh well, I'm tired. You're like, we all could have guessed you were
Yeah,
going to be tired.
kind of like what is that? Cool Hand Luke. He's like, I could eat 50 eggs. Then he's got to eat them.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
I am intrigued by that
Thank you.
because one of the things that was interesting for me approaching the start was being very nervous and encountering other hikers who seemed very with it and professional and to have it all together and had done a lot of long trails and all of that. Of course, later I discovered that they were insecure in some ways that I didn't expect or know, as at least as I encountered them. And I wonder what it was like as you sort of in your head as you're approaching the beginning of this thing. And you're kind of approaching it side by side with people who have half of the objective that you do. So it's like a lot longer grind that you've got ahead of you. Do you remember like kind of driving out to the trailhead and like, I mean, was there any, holy crap, what have I done? This is ridiculous. Or were you just like, yeah, here's the thing?
Yeah, I was excited. I had some plantar fascia like injuries from what I was told. I like partially tore some of the plantar fascia fibers in my foot years ago, and I really hadn't run in maybe 8 years, 7 years, or been able to jog really. Um, so I was wearing boots, and so the only thing I thought was like I'm just gonna have to deal with some foot pain of like blisters and stuff. And yeah, once you get down there, I wasn't necessarily nervous. I was excited. I was supposed to start about 5 days or 6 days later than I originally started, but I was off work then and I was just sitting around and I was like, let's just get this ball
A
rolling.
little bonus.
And yeah, and I wasn't really, so the year before I was a gigantic snow year for this year, 2017. And I went through in late June during like the big melt and did most of the John Muir. And I want to do all the high passes and see if it was feasible for me to do that, if I could keep up with the through hikers. I had heavy gear, I had boots. I was thinking if I could get through and keep up with people now, I'm sure if I streamlined my kit and just had it in my mind of what I needed, then I could go through the Sierra early. Like my whole goal was I wanted to be the first
Yeah.
group through the Sierra. I wanted that true wilderness experience of not following tracks in the snow, of just navigating what seemed like could have been
So
200
it was,
years
it was
ago.
it less was
And
it less about the time frame and more about the adventure?
yeah, so I couldn't have cared how long it took me to do the yo-yo. Like I'm pretty sure I am the slowest person to ever do the yo-yo. but I'm also the first person to ever mountaineer the Sierra on a yo-yo. Most people wait until there's minimal snow on the way north, and my whole goal was to have a normal through hike for the first bit, where I had a trail family, where I was taking zeros and hanging out, and doing all the things that maybe somebody going at a with a less ambitious overall goal was able to experience on a through hike. Because most people going for something this long had already had that, and this is not their first through hike. So I was more interested in gathering those friends, gathering those connections, and then, as they took shorter days and zeros in Northern California and Oregon, I started watching my average miles per day click up closer to 30, and I knew once it hit 30, I was going to have to venture out on my own. I didn't know how much more feasible it would be for me to average 30 over, you know, 3,000 miles.
Did anyone go with you, or were you pretty well on your own by that?
There was one guy that kind of hung with me for like a few days, maybe like 2 days into Portland, and then as soon as we got to Trout Lake in Washington, he kind of let me know that he was going to stay and wait for people that were
So
about
you were
a
really
day
out
or two
front. You were one
behind.
of the first
And
then.
yeah, I mean, there were a few people ahead of me. Yeah, I mean, I had taken some days off and people were just like grinding at that point, and that was right when I started to be like, it's time for me to kind of put the pedal to the metal. And, at that point I had Hokas, so I had trail runners. I didn't have 10 blisters on each foot at all times, which made it so much easier. As soon as I switched to that in Bend, Oregon, I really became feasible in my brain. I thought I was going to struggle my way to the end, but I was going to do it, but it wasn't going to be as fun. And then once I got the shoes, my foot wasn't hurting anymore. It was so much stronger. My feet grew 2 sizes while I was on trail. Eventually, I was able to just put the pedal to the metal, and that was when I was basically alone after that. Yeah, it was a long time alone. I was seeing a lot of
Yeah, I bet.
Sobos at that point, so there was still a lot of, but it was more like I take a break, and then someone's like, "Hey, you're the guy doing
Uh,
this," and then I'm like, at that, it was, I don't know. At that point, I didn't. I was like 145 pounds. I had one battery supply in Washington, and I'm 6'2" and a half. So if you can
yeah,
imagine, that's like
yeah.
unhealthy. So I would just get up and just like sometimes just like walk 5 more minutes to where there was nobody and then take my break because I like just couldn't hold a conversation as well. I was when your fat gets that low, it's like hard to
There
think
was
sometimes.
there's a I don't know how much if you've had any time in the book, but there's a section where I'm describing northbound hikers, especially males, and I said there are like three types. And the one type I describe as like almost empty, like vacant, doesn't engage. The other type is just like I just want to get this thing done, get out of my way. And then the third is sort of like eyes all around going, "Oh, it's everything's so beautiful. You got to take it all in. Don't miss a second."
Yeah.
It sounds like, well, one, I guess, do you think that's an accurate sort of description of sort of type? And then three, and then secondly, it sounds like you may have been in that first category at that point.
Yeah, I would like the thing that was keeping me going is I would say the majority of my day I would be like just
Yeah,
exhausted during that period. But the thing that would keep me going is the ability to then look around at certain parts of the day and
yeah,
be
yeah,
that third category. Where there was moments throughout the day after a long climb where I could just lift my head and be like, this is amazing that I was able to just climb out of Micah Lake and do that
yeah,
gigantic climb in Glacier Peak. I'm dying. I'm exhausted. Um, every little win gives you a little bit of confidence. I was, I couldn't have been further away from number
uh-huh,
two of somebody wanting it to be
cool, yeah,
over. I would have
that's
done it
cool,
forever.
yeah.
I could have just kept
Even
lapping
with
it
all the
if I
weight
if,
loss, did you get that
if it
dialed in
would have
pretty
been
quickly,
feasible.
or
Yeah, at that point, my goal was I needed to get to Canada by August 1st. If I got there by August 1st, then my mileage I would need to maintain to get to the Sierra would be low 30s, but it needed to, um, I just needed to get there so I could hit that arbitrary goal. If I hit that arbitrary goal, it could have one day earlier
yeah,
or
for
later.
sure.
I don't think it would have affected the trip that much, but in my head, it was can I make this push? Washington was really hard to do twice in a row, especially in that kind of condition. But once I got to Canada, I went to Raven Songs in Mazama and basically just ate for 24 hours. Just sat there and just ate like, over a dozen eggs and a couple pounds of cheese and peanut butter and pancakes and just then I regained some strength. And from then, I think we averaged like 30, 36 or 37 or something like that, through
You
Washington on the
said
way
we
south.
had you joined up with somebody at that point?
I just had met somebody and then I don't know. I always just say we because it feels like it was somebody else sometimes too.
You had a split personality.
That's what was in those moments. I was like visualizing myself as coach
Okay,
and player,
interesting.
and like me, the hiker was me, the player was the hiker who was exhausted, frustrated, getting a little bit like cranky sometimes because I was just so tired. And then at the end of the day, I would try to look and be like, all right, what's going on? Okay, maybe I need to eat more in the morning. Next time I get to town, I need to get a couple extra calories and maybe just sit for 6 hours and just kind of eat and maybe have one day where I'm not pushing to the extreme. Like I could do a Nero, but a Nero where I only do 30 miles instead of pushing to like 40. And didn't work out that well because I kept just pushing. But eventually I had enough time. Like I got to trail days. I took a day off at trail days. That was fantastic. Um,
Yeah, did you feel like you were
I
drawing
one of my
life? I
goals
mean, was
was
there
to
any way in which you were kind of drawing life from the community around you? Were people getting excited about your yo-yo attempt? Was there something rewarding in in being there and not necessarily some sort of like 2018 trail celebrity, but just kind of like we're all doing this together and people are excited about what I'm doing? I mean, was there any of that going on or?
yeah, and just like people believing in me was something I didn't really expect people, or I didn't even know was going to be
Hmm.
a thing that people would necessarily even know much about who I am as like a noticeable person in the
Hmm.
middle of the woods,
Yeah.
just walking and struggling. But yeah, I mean, and like I'm very resilient. Like the harder it gets, the more I think like this is when other
Hmm.
people quit. And that was something that kind of kept me going. And then you meet somebody, you have a great conversation with somebody, and it really kind of uplifts your spirits. Like at that point, I was really craving like just
Yeah.
connection with people.
Were you
Like
ever tempted? Were you ever
I had
tempted to
never
slow down and stay with a slower group? No, it's kind
at that point I had already done that as much as I
of
possibly could.
yeah.
I had used up all those days on the way north to the point where now it was over one whole through hike of me having to push. And Um, I had never really camped alone. I think the whole PCT up until that point where I left
Where was that?
people.
Okay,
Trout Lake,
okay. So you had a little gap in
Washington,
there
but
from
that was only
Trout
just one
Lake
guy one day.
to no.
Yeah, yeah. And it was just more like and then on the way south you start to like my friends and I sat on this rock and took a break and remember that joke and we all cracked
Yeah.
up for 10 minutes and then there was a couple weeks where it's like I wasn't necessarily
Uh-huh.
laughing. Like I wasn't having that same experience and it kind of was a little bit not sad, but it just made me reminisce a lot about the times and spending time with people and having those guttural laughs on trail where it's like you haven't laughed like
Yeah.
that in years and like a true I can't control myself
Did you
laughing.
ever get tired of
And
because it sounds like you're meeting new people all the time. Did you ever get tired of that sort of initial trail introduction where you're saying you have to have the same first 5 minutes every time or something?
definitely, hold on a second. Sorry. My dog pushed the door open. Yeah, you have the same conversations. It's kind of like going to I used to talk about it. It's like going to In-N-Out Burger. Like I can tell you exactly what I'm gonna say word for word. I'm gonna tell you what they're gonna say word for word, and then we're gonna move on. And it started to kind of be similar to that, explaining the same thing. Yes, I'm skinny. I know. I should eat more. Oh, really? And then like fighting the urge to snap back with like some people maybe should eat less or like Because like at that point, people are just telling me this stuff. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's called pushing yourself too hard. Like it's called having a goal and then not giving up
Yeah.
because it's hard. And like so that was kind of the only thing that kind of frustrated me was people telling me I should eat that clearly overeat. And that was the thing that was starting to bug me, just because it's like, yeah, I'm out here pushing myself, and this is a potential side effect.
Are these mostly Sobos?
No, it would be Nobos on the way after I
Okay.
was going south. Like they came in pretty heavy, and then once they left, I was alone. I didn't see people for multiple periods for 4 days at a
Yeah.
time.
So you're an August 4th touch. We left the border July 2nd, I want to say. No, we left for the border from Hearts Pass July 2nd. Took us a couple days to get there. So I guess we're a July 4th start, headed south. I've got this like memory of a person. You weren't wearing a black raincoat, were you? Or wind rain like shell?
Yeah, yeah, I have one.
I wonder. See, there's this. I got
That
this
was that was
vision
the
of us,
that
like,
was the
and
only
I think it
jacket I
was somewhere
had.
around the Swaddle maybe section. I've got this vision of Monica
Dude, was that when
stopping
we
and
got
talking to
rain?
somebody who had just kind of this like faraway look, but I don't remember the like the what the conversation contained. But that's like I was trying to think when we were going to talk. I was like, I wonder if we passed him and didn't know it. And the likelihood is we would have passed on trail because you spend most of
Yeah,
the same amount of time walking, and so the chances are we did cross,
yeah.
but it would have been at an odd time. We would have been unique in that we were a family,
I was
but
doing,
but you would have also, I would think, be pretty unique because you'd have been out front.
and I was doing a lot of night hiking at
Okay.
that point. I was so tired. I was so tired and slow that I was like napping in the dirt a couple times a
Well,
day,
you certainly could have passed us
and
at
then
night because we went to bed early. We
and
were
then
sleeping
walking.
early.
Yeah, yeah. I was walking till like 10, 11
Wow.
p.m.
Yeah, but it
some
was pretty
nights,
light then. Like it
just
was
by
light till maybe 9:30,
yeah.
something like that.
So, so only like an hour and a half of
Yeah.
headlamping it, but at some point I was just behind my mileage and my pace was a little bit slower. But also, I am not unique looking on
Yeah,
trail in
by that
terms of
time, right? Like
tall,
every
skinny white guy with a black
every
jacket.
every second male you pass, you're like, that guy needs to eat.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and he's got a beard. So
And the, and the thing for me is my metabolism already is so high that like I don't think people understand. Like I was eating when I like my jaw was getting tired. I
yeah,
was having to eat so
yeah.
much. Like I was forcing food down. People go like, "Oh, that's lucky." And like you've never had to like sit there and not be hungry and be full and then like I need 1,000 more calories before I can
Did
even go
you
to bed.
did you have a calorie count? Like, did you have a beat on that? What you were actually taking in?
Yeah, no, I mean it was just a lot. I mean, because I mean at some points during that section I was just like every time I get to a water source I would just stop for like half an hour and just spoon peanut butter into my mouth and then to wash it down with the water that I had available. And then I mean, not an exact amount because honestly, I was a little bit hazy, but I was
Yeah,
insatiable.
yeah,
I was eating all day. My backpack, like when you look at a 4 day resupply, mine was like 30% bigger than like the
oh
guy next
yeah,
to me in my
yeah.
group
Well, I remember that
earlier on
seeing your
because
food bag. I was like, that's a gigantic food bag. And then you took out the mayonnaise and just squeezed it straight in your mouth. And we started doing that right after we met you. We were like, next stop, we were like, squeeze bottle of mayonnaise for everybody.
and the thing it sounds so
Yeah.
horrible off trail.
Oh,
But
it's
then
so
when you're
good.
there, you're like, your body just was like, thank you for just the
Oh yeah,
densest calories we could
yeah.
possibly find.
So when did you start feeling better? Was it immediately on the way south? You said it was just after Mazama you did. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, that's great.
yeah. After Mazama, I was good. I was feeling amazing, you know, pushing 40 and 42 and 45 and 38, 37 and putting all those stacking those back to back to back
Yeah.
in Washington. Really, I also thought like if I could push that like 36 or 37 or whatever I needed to get to trail days at Cascade Locks, if I could get there, see some of my friends, get a boost, take a day off, and complete Washington twice. We all know Oregon's a little bit easier, especially after you climb up to Mount Hood.
You're talking about on the way south.
So
Yeah.
yeah, on the way south. So then that was kind of my goal is like if I could get there, then it's really on. Then it's up to me to just if I can do that many miles there, I can maintain that in Oregon and the push is on. The next little arbitrary goal or checkpoint I reached, it just kind of it in my brain it was shutting up that little guy telling me I couldn't or I might not be able to or maybe I took off more than I could chew and it was really feeding the side going like you got this, you just got to keep digging deep, it's not the time to let up, like this is what you were here for, you were here to see what you could do physically, what my body was fully capable of, and stopping short of that is just going to give you things to think about the rest of your life. I didn't want to be that guy anymore. Like I could have been a greater soccer player, but I lost focus and had some injuries. And I wanted to prove to myself that I was the athlete that I thought I was growing up as well, and that I was still that, or the athlete that I was telling my kids to be that I coach. To persevere when things get hard, that's the time
Yeah.
you double down, that's the time you focus. And I wanted to see if I was full of it or if that
Yeah.
was something that was still inside of me.
I ran cross country in college, and I can remember finishing a race, and I'd lay in the trailer for half an hour coughing, not able to breathe, and I'd get out, I'd stand up. First thing I'd think was, man, I could have gone faster.
Yeah,
Right,
a
just a
little
little
bit,
bit.
just a little bit.
But it was so interesting is, of course, like, you had that potential, and I didn't have any of that possibility. Walking behind 11-year-old and a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old, I never really ever. I mean, I was pushing myself outside some boundaries, but certainly not physically, um, to do it.
You had so many more things to deal with. Like you had to worry about other people and keep morale high and stuff like that. Like I let my morale get so low. I used to think about it as like I had 2 meters. I had a physical meter, and then once that started to drain, then you start using
Yeah,
your emotional meter. And then once your emotional meter gets drained, that's when you have your little like trail
yeah,
breakdowns, your little like
yeah,
hoot moments where you're exhausted and stuff. There's a point in in just like NorCal on the way south where I did something to my shoulder, rotator cuff or like nerves, but I lost feeling in two of my fingers and I had to use my shirt as a sling for 600 miles. I like couldn't move it. I was sleeping. It felt like somebody was stabbing me. My physical meter was starting to go down at that point because I was just tired and it hurt, and I don't have a hip belt, so I'm
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
putting it all
yeah.
on the other shoulder.
And you're carrying big food, so
Then
you're
my
not
emotional,
light.
yeah, and I'm still trying to do 37, 38 miles a day. And, every day at some point towards like maybe the 5 o'clock time, my emotional meter would run dry of just dealing with the pain all day, and I would just kind of break down, and I would just kind of like sit there and like just like whimper for a minute because it was so much. Like I was just like being strong, and then at some point I was just like heck, dude, I can't do this. And so I would just sit down and just let myself just get it out, and then be like, all right, we got 15 more to do, and then get up and crank that out, and then just slept on my other shoulder for a while. And my only goal was I'm gonna need my poles for the Sierra, so I need to rest this up so I could use my second arm
Was it
in the
harder for
Sierra.
you when you're laying down in the middle of the day recovering? Was it harder for you to convince yourself to rest or to force yourself to get up and go again?
I needed to. It was to the point where if I kept going, it was just like diminishing returns. I was going too slow. I felt like a half an hour nap in the ground would was giving me more energy to then walk faster
Yeah,
for those next like four
yeah.
or 5 hours. But it was more than making up for the fact that I was just getting slower
Yeah,
and
that's cool. It
slower and
almost sounds
slower.
like you're doing, like, no wonder you have sort of this like idea of two of you, the player and the coach, because it's almost like you're making a study of yourself and trying to learn, like, and ignore the even Like you're trying to mentally be aware of the mental state and to coach that as well. Like it's a really interesting, a very different experience than I had. But it's almost like no wonder you talk about it like it's almost two different people because it really is. Like you got, I mean, you've got to analyze it very carefully and fairly because your whole experience depends on it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, then probably the biggest thing that I had a blind spot on was um when I was getting that tired, I was looking at all of the other things. I was looking at it not from a personal
Hmm.
care point of view. And then at a certain point, I was kind of like I need to be washing my feet every day. I need to be doing something. I just kind of stopped caring. The push was everything. And like I'm getting the miles in, doesn't matter. And then I was like, hey, I need to do those small things. I need to stop and wash out my liner socks in throughout the day so they
Yeah.
could dry. And you just get into that zombie state where it's just get there, get there, get there, and you start to forget your like personal upkeep
Did you
stuff.
actually set
Or
alarms and stuff, or make note like in your phone or anything like that, or were you just kind of keeping track in your head? Yeah.
yeah, some days if I pushed long, I would. Some days if I went to bed by 9 o'clock, I'm up by 5 or 4:30. Like as soon as it starts to get light or something, I was like waking up going like I'm late and just getting packed up quick. And then probably one of my favorite things is waking up in the dark, packing up my headlamp, getting moving because usually campsites aren't the best views, and then like getting to that next climb or getting to that next section or next area as the sun is coming up and seeing all the wildlife that's out at that time, right before light and right as like
Yeah.
dawn is starting to come, were some of the most awesome wildlife experiences where even when there were other hikers around, nobody was even up yet. Everyone's sleeping in. And it was kind of that, I don't know. One of my biggest things was for most of that trip, I saw like every single sunrise and every
Oh, that's
sunset
awesome.
every day.
Yeah.
So I would stop at a view during sunset and have dinner and then hike for another hour or so at night and make sure I was at like a good spot to
When
watch
did you
the sun
start
go
doing that?
down
Early?
or to kind of, yeah, pretty early. I would say maybe like off and on before the Sierra. The Sierra, obviously, we were
Yeah.
going to bed before dark, and so yeah, I would say like after the
Uh,
snow went away, so
yeah.
like past Truckee, we started doing that
We
every
we
day
did that. We did that in
on
Southern California
consistently.
just to get more rest and to not be eating in the cold after dark. And at the very end, we'd stop and eat about
Yeah.
half an hour before dark and kind of get fit up. One thing I think might be interesting is when we first started, all these people were hiking 25, shooting for 25 miles a day, and we were trying to find ways to compare ourselves and make us feel better about our lower miles. And so we would say, there's no way you can enjoy it at that kind of mileage. You can't enjoy it and take it in. And it took until we were walking 25, 30 miles ourselves when I was like, oh no, you can see a lot going at about a walking pace. Like it's pretty cool experience.
And the amount of like endorphins you get
Hmm.
all
Yeah.
day, like from
Yeah.
from from pushing like that, and then you wake up and
Yeah.
you're not sore, and you're
Yeah.
like, this is getting
I love the late
dangerous. Like,
afternoon when you kind of get that little hit, like, that kind of second wind and you're just like everything's kind of that golden glow and you're kind of pushing into the evening. That's maybe my favorite part of the day.
that's my like
Yeah.
time of the day where like from that like
Yeah.
3 o'clock, 4 o'clock time on is when I find my second wind and all of a sudden I'm, trotting down trail, jogging a tiny bit, or just trying to get those extra miles in when it feels like your legs are
Uh-huh.
on autopilot.
Yeah.
They're tired, but they're
Yeah.
still moving on
Yeah.
them by
Yeah. Almost
themselves.
by themselves. That's cool. So what date did you set yourself as a goal for the Sierra on the way south?
I just wanted to be through by like the second week of
Okay.
October. Luckily, the way the weather has been changing, they don't necessarily get gigantic season-ending storms as early as they used to be, as they used to. So at that point, I was just happy to have maintained some miles after my shoulder. It was just to get through as fast as I possibly could. The goal was before the snow flies heavy. I knew I'd probably get dustings, but it was before it got to the point where, you're at your knee. Once you're at your knee, it slows to a crawl. And as you experience as well, fall snow is much more of a serious situation than hiking through as much snow as you possibly
Huh.
can in the spring.
Yeah, that's true because you're not as warm.
The days are short. The days are short. It's colder. It's wetter snow. And just the nights are a lot colder. There's a little
Yeah,
bite to the air that there isn't in
yeah.
the springtime.
All right, so one more question before we get to the Sierra. I wondered, because you mentioned that Washington was hard, turning and walking back through Washington. When was it that, because one of the things that's so cool is like if I do an out and back, I don't mind doing an out and back now because when I turn around, it feels like a whole different trail. But I'm wondering when the experience got interesting again because of season change. And I mean, did it already start to get different enough that your second time through Oregon was different and interesting?
The the second half of Washington
Yeah.
South was different. At that point, a lot of seasonal water sources that I had
Oh,
gone to
geez.
and thought would still be there were gone,
Yeah.
and just all the people
Uh-huh.
had come through. So then, like, I wasn't on the way north is like the only time in Washington and certain places like Glacier Peak where there was almost nobody yet. Where I didn't filter for a little bit. I was just being tired. And then as soon as I started crossing the Nobos and Sobos and stuff, then I was like, ugh,
These
like,
tourists.
yeah. Well, and just like, no, it's like, you turn a
Yeah.
corner and you see someone like peeing too
Oh,
close
yeah.
to the source and you're like, ugh, all right. Um, so yeah, it definitely started to change a little bit on the way south, but Oregon was completely different. I mean, on the way north, Oregon was hell on earth. I mean, just the
Mosquitoes,
biggest
right?
mosquitoes nonstop, just swarms. Like
Uh-huh.
every break, you'd stop and set up your tent and just throw your tent over you and just sit there miserably, putting my headphones in with music all night so I couldn't hear the buzzing. And then the way south, it was
Yeah.
like a paradise.
Yeah.
No
That's
bugs,
great.
no people. It was just like me and all the places I looked at as I
Uh-huh.
ran by
Oh, yeah.
on the way
I
north.
guess ours was probably southern Washington when we got hit hardest by the mosquitoes, but we're going south, so we're going through them. But I can remember Georgie just dancing in place and screaming about mosquitoes. And I was like, you just have to go. Like, you have to move or they're going to be.
It's a big mental like
Hmm.
test. There's no other mental test like it than just being
Are
eaten
you
alive
talking
for a
out
week
loud to
straight.
yourself while you're a solo hiker? Okay.
No, there was a point where in just south of Sayed Valley, I hadn't seen anybody in 4 days, and I saw these hunters with a huge elk hanging from a tree, and at one of the break spots, and so I went and sat down, and when I went to speak to them, it's like I had cobwebs in my voice. I was like, and I was like, oh, hey, how's it going? And they were like, hey, what's going on? I was like, honestly, nothing. I just haven't talked to anybody in a few days. Would you guys mind just having a conversation with me? And they were like, all right. And I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna be here for like 10 minutes, but like I literally haven't talked to anybody in a while.
Yeah.
So what's going on? And then and then I got up and kind of jogged off a little bit, and they were just like, what the heck is going on? So yeah, I mean, you get. I don't talk to myself necessarily. I do in my own head, I guess, but
Yeah.
not out.
Yeah, I always wonder about the solo experience. So much different than doing it the way we did it. But so when did you make it to the Sierra? And let me interject. I'm going to
About
tell you this. Yeah,
October, I guess.
this is
October
fantastic. We
1st.
got, I don't know if you know my story about my math, but I'd been talking to people and they're like, don't go solo. You can't keep up. Your family won't be able to do it. You got to walk 20 miles a day, even if you start at the earliest possible date. And I was like, that can't be. That's ridiculous. I did all my math and got it all sorted. Made it to Portland and we were resupplying, planning to stay there 3 days. And I got a text from a friend, and the friend said, "You got to pick up the pace." And I was like, "No, man, I was planning on 16 miles a day through Washington average, and we made 18. Like, we're killing it. I don't know what you're talking about." And he said, "No, you have to pick up the pace." And I was like, "No, I'm fine. All we have to do is make it to the Sierra by mid-October or early October." And he's like, "Not to the Sierra, you idiot,
You got to
through
get
the Sierra."
through the Sierra.
Only a difference of 300 to 400 miles. So it just changed everything. So all of a sudden, I'm like, when do I break the news to my family that we've got to go an average of 26 miles per day if we want to take a break every eighth day? Like it was so bad. So you can,
I would say at Mount Hood, I would say that after you've
that's what
done
we
all the
did.
climbing
That's
to get out
exactly
of
where I told them
Cascade
we were
Lodge.
leaving Timberline I waited till after the buffet when everybody's full and fat and happy. And we were looking,
Yeah.
and you look down out across the range there, and all the hills look a lot friendlier and everything like that. And I was like, that's when I chose. I was like, Monica, I believe we could I believe we could keep going at about 25 a day, maybe 26. What do you think? She was pretty, it wasn't an easy bit of news to take, but we ended up, I mean, we fell off pace a couple of days, but we ended up there, I guess, just a little bit ahead of you. Was Red's Meadows still open, the restaurant, when you got there?
No, I mean I didn't even try. I mean I didn't go to any of those places on the way north. Everything was closed. I've never been to. I've done the John Muir like I don't know 5 6 times. I've
Oh,
never been to
really? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
VVR. Yeah, I've never
So you just carried through. Where did you carry
done the Red
from?
Meadow
Where'd you resupply? Oh, okay.
Mammoth. So I just go into Mammoth is like it's super cheap.
Okay.
I know people there, so I just got picked up by a
Okay.
family friend and then stayed at their
Okay.
house for a day or two, for two
So you
days.
must have entered the Sierra right behind us then.
Yeah, like I pushed pretty good through the northern part from Sonora Pass um to Mammoth, but that last day getting into Mammoth over Donahue Pass, I pushed really hard into the night and got up to that campsite kind of right where you cross the creek before Donahue Pass. There's a couple trees and just had like 60-mile-an-hour
Oh,
winds all
really?
night. I mean, I was holding up my tent. I had woke up with sand everywhere, didn't sleep much. And then so I just got up and got into Mammoth as
That's a
fast as I
that's
possibly
the
could
that's
the next
above
day, just
Tuolumne with the
exhausted.
kind of pooled up creek area. Yeah, when we were
Yeah.
there, it was sunny and perfect, and we
Yeah, like
fished all day, like all afternoon. We stood there and fished.
Lyle Canyon is one of the most beautiful places in
Yeah, it was
like
really
all of
pretty.
Yosemite. That from
Uh-huh.
Tuolumne to Donahue, that nice, beautiful, windy cabin where probably canyon
Yeah,
where you were
yeah, that
fishing.
was awfully nice. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's very beautiful.
So where were you in the rain? Or were you alone, or I remember we ran into you with Starter. Were you a
Yeah, so we were alone, and I just had run into Starter. So I left Mammoth and then walked 3 miles the wrong direction,
How'd
and
you do
then
that?
or 4 miles. There's that one spot where the trail does like a full 180 and turns around in that area, and I just walked
Jeez.
right past the junction. You're just on autopilot, and you're thinking, yeah, I'm going south, and I realized it turned around. I could have got back to a different trail, but at that point, I didn't want to miss miles on the actual PCT just because of something. So I was like, it's whatever, 6 7 miles, just get it done and keep the whole thing of actually doing it and not making exceptions just because I made a mistake. And then yeah, ran to the start of that day. That hiked into the night as far as I could, just knowing that it was gonna rain. And then I woke up and starter was gone early in the morning. I started hiking. That was like over
Uh-huh.
Silver Pass, and that was when it turned to like sleet and like frozen rain. And that black jacket that Monica potentially saw me with had been so thin, it was 10 years old. I didn't realize like all the waterproofing on the inside was completely gone. And so I got hypothermia going over
While
that
you're walking.
pass. And yeah, and I was so skinny at that point again. I had lost enough body mass where um I wasn't able to push and warm myself up just through just pushing hard and exercising. Yeah, my hands basically started freezing and then it moved up to my core. I felt it. I was shaking, shivering, walking down trail. And then again, this is probably the most important time when me, the player, and me, the coach, came out. Was I was like, I can keep pushing. I'm gonna get down, and then like I was hypothermic. I was shivering uncontrollably and stumbling around, and and then I thought in my head like, hey, why don't you just sit down and take a break for like 10 minutes and just rest a little bit, and then you'll be able to keep going. Well, that's kind of when you sit down and don't get up. If you're hypothermic, you sit down, you close your eyes, you nod off, and then that's that. Alarm bells just went off in my head. As soon as my brain thought that, I was just like, nope, you're making stupid decisions. You need to just stop, set up, get inside, get into a better space, and you're not pushing your way through this one. And yeah, it took me so long to set up my tent because I couldn't use my fingers. My fingers were purple. My fingers were blue. They were like pale and bluish, and like I couldn't even articulate them at all. I was going like this, trying to like set up my tent and put the clips around the poles. And once I got inside, I was trying to stay awake, but I kept like nodding off, and so I was like kind of yelling to like force air through my like lungs and my throat and stuff to like keep me awake. So there's something like physical going on, not just me thinking something. And then I ended up basically falling asleep, but my dream was me trying to stay awake. And then I woke up, rolled over on the side of my tent, shaking like I was having a seizure or something. That scared the
Yeah.
the crap out of me. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I think I would have died if I wouldn't have something in my head wouldn't have screamed to wake up. So that woke me up though. I was sheer panic. Started trying to tear open bars. I couldn't use my fingers still. So I was like pushing the bars between my wrists and ripping them open and ate like, enough bars where eventually I started getting a little warmer. My quilt, even though it was wet, I was starting to retain a little bit of heat. I was warming up a tiny bit. The shivering started to subside. Um, my abs and my back were hurting so bad from just violent shaking for multiple hours. And at that point, it was like a relief to just not be shaking for a good reason,
Yeah.
as
Yeah. Yeah.
opposed
Yeah.
to kind of giving up. Because at some points, I felt my body kind of giving up when I wasn't warm yet. Like the shaking would kind of subside, even though I was still that cold. And that was kind of scary to me because I could feel my body kind of giving up at a certain point. Like, yeah. And then I took a nap. Once I realized I was safe, I took a nap. And then I woke up and it was game time. So I was like,
Was it clear
all
at
right,
that point?
I th
It wasn't. Still
no,
raining?
it was no, yeah. So I had an inReach, and on the inReach you can send out weather reports for a specific GPS location. So I would send out for where I was, my midway point, and where I was going to end up the day, or any sort of high point or something where weather could be different. And I looked at them and realized I had some windows. So I waited, and then I got up like maybe hour and a half, 2 hours before dark. I started hiking. I pushed a couple hours in the dark to a sheltered campsite I knew
When you say
during that break.
sheltered, you mean just under trees?
Yeah, just with some trees, and it wasn't going to be exposed to the wind. It was kind of an area that I could be in a storm, and I wasn't going to be getting the brunt of it. Um, and then I got there, and I was just so exhausted. I mean, I've never felt like a deep sense of exhaustion like I did that day with the shivering and shaking. And then got there and again reassessed, sent out
And you
all
you
of
were not a
the
stranger to winter
inReach.
hiking and camping.
No, it was just a matter of not having gloves, really, or gloves that fit me anymore because they had shrunk so much. And then the
Just
water,
being wet.
the rain jacket that
Was your
wasn't
gear
a rain
was your
jacket
gear wet
anymore.
too? Like was your bag wet and your
No, so my bag from Superior Wilderness Designs
okay.
is completely waterproof. So all my stuff is completely dry on the inside. My quilt was a little bit, but that was just because I was getting
Hmm.
it out
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
rain and I was so slow with my hands, I dropped it, and so like, but Sorry, I'm trying to figure out where I was again. And then once we got to, oh, and so I set out the new weather reports, and basically I had to come up with a whole new tactic. I couldn't hike in the morning. It was too cold. My hands would freeze, and then I would have to stop and reset up something. So I looked at the weather windows, and I got up really early the next day, rushed as hard as I could, got over
Mhm.
Selden Pass, Silver Pass, whichever the one is right before is the second one you see on the way south before
I want to say silver,
VVR
but
and stuff like
I'm not
that.
confident.
Yeah, I always get those two flipped up. And so, yeah, and then the weather was coming and I could see it. And so I was pushing it, pushing. I was like, if I get to here, there's a campsite, I can reassess. I got there, the weather was still behind me, and I was kind of outrunning it a little bit. I mean, not really, but I thought I was.
Is that
And
that low
so,
one? Is that that
and then
low
I
one right
got,
along the creek?
yes, yeah, where you're kind of low walking along. Yeah. And then I got to just before the climb, those like three bridges or two bridges right before you climb up to Evolution Creek. I got there and I was like, it's not on me yet. I can see it coming down the canyon. I was like, I think I can get to another place I'd been the like
It
previous
opens
2 years
up
in a row.
pretty much after that, though, doesn't it?
I wanted to get
Oh, okay.
Evolution Creek crossed.
It was so
Like
shallow.
I didn't want to, yeah, and I didn't want to do it. I
Yeah,
didn't want to do it in the morning. It was starting to
yeah,
get a
yeah.
little bit higher with the rain and stuff. And so I got to before that climb and realized like I could probably get there and push hard all the way to that spot. And so I did and crossed the creek and everything. And then it started snowing on me like right as I was setting up everything. And I just crawled in. I managed to escape all the snow that day. We were going to get dumped on all night. I just had to get my miles in during that window
Do you remember how far
because
you were
at that
from the
point,
hut, Mere Hut?
I mean, only what is that?
Yeah,
Probably six
yeah, that's
miles,
fun.
7 miles. Just that, just going up maybe even less than that. It's just going up the staircase or whatever, that big climb and then hiking along the lakes. And then I was
That's
there.
where we were. So we were in the hut while you were down in the
Yeah.
snow.
Yeah, I was just past the ranger station in Evolution, maybe like 2.5 miles past that. So not too far up the canyon, just enough where again I knew of a spot where I knew I could set up and it wasn't me having to think or improvise or
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
find a
yeah.
spot or set up or something less than during the storm. And at that point, I needed to make up miles because I had brought extra food, the shivering and everything. I had eaten all that extra food and I didn't do the miles I was supposed to do that day. So it was coming down to this time where it was like I'm either gonna have a rough last day or I'm gonna just need to push and just get through it, and it is what it is.
And that's
And
yeah. So
then
that's. Did you wake up thinking you might go out Bishop Pass over the top there? You did not.
no,
Okay.
no, no. I had a friend coming in
Resupply.
Kearsarge.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a buddy that I hiked north
Okay.
with who was gonna. I had kind of messaged him and let him know like, hey, this happened, and he was like, I can hike it in over Kearsarge and meet you. And so he hiked in so much food, just like
For
12
some reason in my
sausages.
head, I make that. I feel like that was that Jeff Garmeyer who was bringing food in?
No, he
Well,
was
he
still doing the
was.
Great Western
For
Loop.
some
This
reason,
was
I tell myself
a
that
guy
story, but
named
it may be
Bible.
conflating it with some story about him running out to get pizza for people or something. I don't know. But it is
That's how he got
okay.
his trail
Yeah.
name.
For some reason,
Yeah, yeah.
had that being
He
the
went out and got
friend that brought you
steaks.
food. I
Yeah.
don't know why. So telling myself that.
No, he's this a guy that just hiked
Yeah.
Nobo, and then he was from Southern
Okay.
California,
So now you brought
and
us to the like the moment that we got to meet you. Like, of course, because we were hiking was so good,
yeah,
and there was another yo-yo that year, and she just kind of kept track of everybody. And I remember her when we passed, or Snacks passed us. I shouldn't say we passed. We didn't pass many people, but when Snacks passed us, she was giving me the kind of lowdown on that and said, "Yeah, there's another yo-yo out here that should be in this area. Like they should be close by." And so we sort of had, this idea that you were out there, and she knew who you were. I guess she was following you on Instagram or something, so she knew who you were, and we had heard through her about you. And we woke up that morning from the hut and I looked out that Dutch door, at that hut. It dripped on us all night. It was miserable. I would much rather have been out in the snow. But I looked out the window and it was socked in. It was so bad early. And then I went back to bed. And then the next thing I wake up, the kid Aiden's standing in the door saying, "Dad, it's perfect outside." And I looked out and it was beautiful. But then kind of as the morning went on, it looked like it was getting cloudy again. And I didn't have a weather report. And I was like, I'm going out Bishop if I can't get dry because all my down was wet because the hyperlight has waterproof material, but not seams. And I didn't know to have a bag liner in there. So I was just completely wet. I was the only one that was wet, but I was real wet. So I just wanted to get dry. So we perched up. That's why we stopped there at that junction because we were debating on whether or not to stay or go. And then all of a sudden, this mustard yellow shirt, guy bounds into the open there, and that's when we met you.
That was like, I think we've said this before, but like I think we both needed that moment. I mean, I remember just walking up and going like, "Can I just take a break with you guys?" Like I've had probably one of the most scariest things that's ever happened to me in the backcountry happened to me the last couple of days. Like I just want to talk to somebody. Like it seemed like it was a experience I hadn't even necessarily been able to process yet. And so I was just sitting there just like, and then like you said, you thought it was good. It helped you guys to know that I had
So much.
struggled
Yeah.
through that storm as well. And it kind of helped me. It made me like not happy, but it made me realize that like it was bad for everybody and that there are people out here and you know even the small thing of like my gloves that didn't fit anymore, well, I could give my gloves to Henry then. Like even just like something like that, just like communal based, just I think raised my spirits and um yeah, just really helped me get through that period of I knew I was tired. I knew it was so rough. And I was just kind of gonna soggily drive my way through the Sierra, whether it was necessarily fun or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
And
for us it was amazing because it was like,
running into you guys was great.
here's this confident, calm, self-assured professional hiker who's gone to the border and back, and he's got it up, and he was scared for his life, and for some reason that was so relieving for us. And what's funny is Henry had walked. It started snowing on us right when we kind of entered the lakes area up there up high, and we went up high to stay in the hut, thinking it would be really warm. Well, when we got there, Henry had been walking with his trekking poles and his hands exposed, and hadn't said anything, and he'd gotten hypothermic to the point that he couldn't make himself move, and so we had to get him out of his clothes and
Yeah.
dry and all that stuff. So those gloves were timely symbolically, if nothing else, because he just walked without gloves in a snow, in a whiteout into that thing. So it was really, really, really cool. And that and your giant food bag. And I don't know if you said it, but it certainly we started saying it after that. Food weight is good weight. Like if you can carry it, you should carry it in food. So we started saying that a lot after that.
Yeah, and especially in the Sierra where um at that time of year things can go wrong. If it's ever snow possible conditions, I always bring an extra day's worth of food. And even then I usually
Yeah.
overpack food anyways, just because
Yeah.
like that's the thing that I need
So
the most.
I think we started
And the
out
funny
from
thing
lunch
is,
with you, and you got a long way out ahead of us, but that night, June, we were trying to get over the top because I think that's what you were trying to do, over the top of the no, might have been the golden staircase that night. And we were trying to get over the top, but
no,
June could not go.
over
It was over
Mather,
Mather?
Mather.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
And we were
over Mather.
trying to make it over the top. And I remember June pitched one of her fits about, "I'm not going to go one step further. This is it. I won't go." And I was like, it's in the teens, low teens here. And So Good's walking one layer light. And I was just like, well, we just have to set up here. So we set up at about, I don't know, probably 11,000 feet or better on that side of the pass in the trees. And I was thinking, this is terrible. I wanted to get over the top and get low. Well, the next morning we came over the top and ran into you guys, and you were all still in your tents because it was so miserable on that other side of the pass, on that southern side of the pass.
It was so warm at the top. I stopped and took a break at the top in the dark because I was walking with Henry and I was trying to push hard and lose him, and he was just keeping up there right with me. And then Aiden somehow comes running up behind us, carrying everything, caught up to us. I was like, Henry, you have to wait for the family now. It's getting late, it's getting dark, and you're getting too far away. And he was like, and then once I got up pretty high on the pass, I could turn around and I could see your string of headlights of headlamps walking down in the distance through the trees still. And that was kind of cool to just sit there and just watch you guys weave for a minute or two. And then once I got to the top, it was 15, 20 degrees warmer than it was down below. Like the inversion was so like
Yeah.
obvious and so like you could just, I mean, I was just sitting up there having dinner,
Yeah.
not even cold. And then I dropped down to where I wanted to camp and I was like, worst mistake of my life. I should have just stayed up here because it was so freezing down there that, yeah, we were still in our tents. And then that was when Starter walked by again and was like, Airborne? And I was like, Starter? And I was like, he's like, yeah, I got hypothermia. And I was like, apparently we got hypothermia like a mile from each other.
He was in a
So
bivvy or something, so he didn't have a whole lot of protection.
yeah, he was a little bit more less risk
The
averse than
story
me.
that I got from another hiker who was reporting in on Starter's experience was that he was hiking, and I think it would have been Silver Pass, I guess, but he was hiking up Silver Pass and starting to get hypothermic, and he said it was the first time he'd cried out to God in a long time, and he said, God, if you'll get me out of this, I promise I'll be good, and I'll change, I'll be good. Came over the top and saw a cave like kind of leaning over, and got under there and was able to start a fire with some dry wood. And then the person telling the story, and may give it away based on the accent, she said, oh, and I said, well, did he change? And she said, oh, he has not changed.
Yeah, I could not have been any more of the
It was
truth.
so funny, such a great story. But yeah, so you kept pushing.
Because he passed you guys in the night. He passed you
Did
guys in
he?
the night that
Okay.
night. Well, I think so because he didn't sleep that whole night,
Yeah, we came
that whole
past him.
next night.
Actually, he must have, because I don't remember exactly when it was, and it probably was that next day that we came, and it was sunny in the morning when we started out. And I remember that we saw him in his sleeping bag on a rock, just laying out off the side of the trail on a rock that was like fully exposed to the sun. He was just sleeping right in the middle of the day.
Yeah, that was after we had left each other too. That whole next day
Okay.
we kind of yo-yoed each other for a little bit. So good and starter and I took a break and you guys kind of pushed on to like the next spot. And then I was trying to kind of like hike with starter a little bit and then he started fading because we got up and started hiking the rest of that day together because I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
somebody else. And then and then he was like, I didn't sleep last night. And then eventually he started fading hard. And I was like, I'm sorry, buddy. I can't just like wait
Yeah.
five
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
I need.
Yeah. No, that's cool. The kids loved it. They were both like, Aiden and Henry took off to walk with you, and Georgie was like, Dad, can I go? And I was like, if you can keep up, you can go. Yeah, and then I think we caught up to Youth Starter, and
You guys are,
so
your kids
yeah,
are
they're good.
amazing
Yeah,
hikers. I can just tell you that. I mean, especially for how young they were at the time and to be that, like, I mean, like, I go out now with people and I hike fast. Like, to have those kids when I was in prime condition, I was pushing as hard as I could, trying to lose them. And to have them just match me pace for pace. Henry's got his hands in his pockets, not even breathing hard. And I'm like on my poles and I'm like, "Arr." All Don and I kept thinking when we saw you guys the next time was like,
oh, that's
wow,
fun. Yeah, yeah. So
machines.
you started. It was fun because once you hit Kenny Meadows South. Sorry, as soon as you hit there, it's kind of you finish when you finish, and you took full advantage, which was great for us because we kept getting to see you south of in the desert down there. So how was that?
Yeah.
How was that for you? I mean, was it just awesome just to get past the Sierra and think like, okay, I've done it. Like I put all the potential stops behind me. Now I'm gonna make it.
Yeah. I mean, so my friend resupplied me at Kearsarge And then I was pushing to get over. It was raining on us all that whole day at Kearsarge or at the junction. And then we started hiking together to go over Forester. And on the way up, we met these three younger girls that were just on a John Muir trip. And I like, without any sort of niceness or, I don't know, I was just like very blunt and to the point. It's like, you need to get going now. You need to get over the pass right now. It's going to start snowing. It's going to be a storm. And tomorrow you're going to have a foot of snow
Yeah.
to deal with. And they were like, what? And I was like, you need to pack up now and get going. And they were just like, who is this guy that just walked up? But when I walked up, they were like, "Are you airborne?" And I was like, "What?" Like, because my buddy was looking for me the day before, I guess, because I didn't arrive till after dark. And so, we ended up going over the pass. It started snowing on us, like up at the top. We got dumped on like a good foot of snow, um, down by the little lake across from Tyndall Creek.
Jeez. On the far side?
And yeah, but that day, 2 days, 2 days after I had given my gloves to Henry, a JMT hiker, was like, "Hey, my buddy's like, you don't have gloves, like, you want to borrow mine?" And I was like, "No, I'm okay for now." And they're like, "Hey, I found a pair of, just like the Mountain Hardware
Oh, it's
liner black
perfect.
ones that
Yeah.
you can kind of push your phone through and stuff like that. Just the ones that I had, the ones I needed." And so she gave me those, but one of the fingers was all melted. So she gave me those, and like the trail provided again. Like I felt like me realizing that I could give Henry
Yeah.
something that I couldn't use really helped then
Yes.
somebody else like give me something that like they couldn't use. And then yeah, once I got over that, then my buddy was gonna hike out with those girls over Whitney, and then they would give him a ride back to Kearsarge. And so he would have his ride figured out. And then I was like, "Hey, I need a arbitrary goal to push really hard. Why don't we, when we split at the Whitney Junction, I am going to go as fast as and as hard as I can all the way
Yeah.
to Kennedy Meadows. I bet you I can get to Kennedy Meadows before
Well,
you guys
some
get
of those
out,
roads in the
get in the
Sierra
car, and get back
add
down."
time rather like you could almost beat them by foot.
Yeah. And so
That's
I did.
awesome.
I beat them by a few hours, and it was just once I got over Forrester, I almost like, I don't think I got emotional, but I felt a sense of relief. I felt a sense of like,
Yes.
"Ugh," like
Yes.
I'm like literally like I'm safe. Like after the last couple of days, I hadn't even processed it yet. I was still like on edge a little bit about like just
Hmm.
getting over that pass. Once I got over that pass, I know every nook and cranny of everything to get out of the Sierra. And then from there, it's easy. So I called the people at Grumpy Bears. I knew them, and I collected a bunch of the brothers
Yeah.
that got
Yeah.
hit by lightning. Yeah, I ran into them. I ran into Sue, if you ever met Sue, Brandon, super awesome guy. And I collected them along the way. And I ran into them at night and I was night hiking. I was like, "Hey guys, I'm trying to make it to here. I got a ride picking me up that can pick all of us up at Kennedy Meadows Trailhead. They're gonna open Grumpy's Bar for two
Nice.
days while I'm in town." They're like, "I heard it was closed." Like, it's gonna be closed. It's normally closed, but they're gonna open it up for me on the way south. And so everyone was like, "Hell yeah!" And so
Wait, it's
we
closed for
ended
the
up getting
season at
in.
that point?
At that
Really?
point, it was during the week. It was just gonna be Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Man. Oh, maybe we got there on the weekend because it was open. I was like, oh man, I wonder if we got in on the.
I had told them that you
Really?
guys were
That's so
coming and you
cool.
were like a family of five.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
so cool.
yeah. And so at that point, like, we got there and it was just like, "Give me some beers, give me the burgers, let me just lay down." And then my friends came, and those girls that he was hiking with that we had met, and just had like a good 2 days of just reminiscing, talking, catching up with people. Troubadour just singing songs out
Man.
by the fire at night. Just kind of everyone had that sense of relief. Mainly just me. I guess everybody else was kind of a
Yeah,
dick.
Troubadour's just about happy
And
wherever he
then
was.
Yeah. I actually met him. There's a place called Diaz Creek or Diaz Creek in between Cottonwood Pass or in between Trail Pass and Kennedy Meadows. And it's a pretty dry section that time of year. And I ran across him just sitting down saying that he went to try to get Diaz Creek water and that he couldn't find anything. And I left Chicken Spring Lake knowing that there probably might not be water because I had been in that area so many times. And so I
That's
gave him
so
half a
awesome.
liter of water to
Yeah.
get to that next spring. And he's like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "I had planned for this anyways, man. No worries. Like it's cold. Like you played a song for me at our break.
Sang for
Like
his supper.
that's yeah." And just like I hadn't seen him. He seemed like he's
Yeah.
such a nice guy. And if I have something that I don't need, especially with something like water where I can get the next stop, and if I don't need it till the next stop where I can just ration a little bit when it's already kind of cold, it didn't even cross my mind to not just give him a little bit of something. I mean, it's taking weight off my pack anyways too. If you want to look at it positively,
Yeah.
it's also helped me
Well,
out.
a part of the reason I was excited about doing this as a general idea, just talking to people that we hiked around, is for those kinds of intersections. I mean, there's no doubt that as Troubadour reflects on his southbound hike, he tells a story about this time he came up to Diaz Creek and was without water and didn't know what he was going to do. Going to have to ration, and then the water, the water comes. Like you get to be a part of his telling of his story, and like it's really cool. Like I think there's something really neat about that experience.
I feel like those interactions are what like really fill up
Hmm.
your cup
Yeah.
when you're out there. Like I learned I can do it alone. I'm very good at just sticking to it and being dead focused and just not deviating that much. But the things that stick out the most to me are the interactions with people, even if it's fleeting. Some people you meet for 5, 10 minutes, and like that sticks in my brain more than a whole day on trail. And those things, there's so many more interact like when we met each other again
Hmm.
twice on trail, and how all those interactions kind of come to be, or like seeing your kids shake water bottles out on Boquete Canyon
You did
Road.
that. You taught us how to do that. That was one of my favorites. Like it was so
Yeah,
fun. So was that before or after this other time we ran into you?
that was the
Second
second
time.
time. So that
Okay.
was
Well,
that
the first one
that
was
was right
great. Yeah, the
before
first one
we
was great
had
because it was just after we spent
yeah
the night in the Yellow Frog closure, and we didn't know how we were going to get to town. It was almost dark. I think the Lightning Brothers, we saw them leave, or was
well,
that
and
the
so
second time? The
that was
third
that was the
time. So we had
third
a
time we
third
had met
time. What was
because
the second time?
yeah because I got off and went to a wedding for 5 days in Tehachapi. So then you guys had caught up
That's
from the
right. And
Sierra
we
and
were
passed
down in
me,
Tehachapi for three
and
days with
then
a waterborne illness.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And I was in
Okay.
San Luis Obispo for a wedding, looking as homeless as ever. And so I got back, and then that was when I had met Don just past Hiker Heaven, or just past Hiker Town, and then
Which
and then
Henry
we saw
hated, by
you
the
that
way.
next
He
day. We
hated it.
had
You
been
were telling us a story about how they might reroute the trail through there, and he was so mad because you get to Hikertown and you walk back up the hill to the north, and then you have to walk back by where you've just climbed. And he was so furious. He hated that.
yeah
Yes, because you ran into us there because you found June's. I forgot about that completely until this moment. But you found June's
yeah.
MP3 player that she dropped.
So Don and I met. I was walking at like 4 o'clock in the 4:30 in the morning because my
Hmm.
buddy had to drop me off, a guy that I knew that lived out there from high school, and I passed Don just laying on the side of the trail, basically, just cowboy camping, no pad or anything. And then he got up, and I took a break shortly after that because I didn't get much sleep. And I was like, "Hey, my name's John, blah blah." We introduced each other. I was like, "Hey, I know of a cool spot. It's like, 15 minutes away. You want to just take a break up there?" And it was exactly where I sat on the same log I sat on the way north.
Oh,
Like
that's
I knew
cool.
this spot, and it was a good memory for me. So I kind of just wanted to get back to that spot, and I sat down and I just looked down, and boom, there was June's MP3 player, and I kind of had forgot about it because I didn't give it to you guys until on the way down
Yeah.
after Wrightwood. But I had picked it up a couple
Yeah.
100 miles earlier and didn't
Yeah.
it kind of just didn't cross my mind. It was just shoved in my pack somewhere. So we had met then the night that we went to Agua Dulce, and my parents came and picked me up, and we
Hmm.
had dinner,
Yeah, I got that picture of
and
you and
then
Henry. from that restaurant.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
that
so
was
fun. It's so fun to meet your
I love
mom.
that trip
Yeah,
too.
to meet your mom there at the restaurant.
And then that was when my best friend, his grandma passed away, and he was flying in from the East Coast. You know, I wasn't able to make it. I was in between sections. I was in the middle of nowhere. And so I missed the funeral and the wake and stuff. But he was still going to be in town, and he was taking him and his siblings to a concert at the Great Western, or what used to be the Forum in LA. And he's like, "Would you like to go?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'm gonna push hard, and I'm gonna get to Agua Dulce, and I want to come see your guys and you guys and your
Was
family
he there at that
during this
restaurant
time."
yet? Or
And
oh, okay.
no, no, he hadn't even flown in yet. And so my parents came and picked me up and then went back, and then he had dropped me off the next day or a day and a half later, back at Trail. And so I went to the concert. You guys had went ahead. Dawn had went ahead, and then it was my turn to just like I need to push hard to catch up to you guys. And that was when we were at the best trail angel in the world, where where I am the only person to escape getting my feet rubbed and touched.
I like I'm so intrigued to like once you run into all these like my retelling of the story, if you tell it the same way that I remember it, or if you remember it the same way that I retold it. But I can just remember like the funniest moment to me was when she went and got that big curling, the curling, whatever you call those things, that for people that do curling, the
Yeah,
curling stone. And she pulled it out of
yeah,
that box and she starts
yeah.
walking it
Because
across to show you that she can hold it. And you're like sitting there and you're like, don't hold that thing over my feet.
yeah, I want to hike.
Oh, it was so funny. And then we got out earlier that next day, and I like because in my telling of the story, every story like this is a quest story, certainly, right? And I was like, it'd be fun if there was a siren, because there's always a siren in a quest story, but usually they're attractive.
Yeah,
But I do remember he was like, "Man, guys, this is so fun. Are you guys sure you don't want to stay?" And we're like, no, we want to go."
I mean, and just like it was just so cluttered and stuff too.
Well, Don
Like
invited us. You guys had
where
your
like
own room. It was going to be two of you and a nice hot, you'd have your nice hot shower. And then he invites us and we're like, pushes the coffee table out of the way and we sleep on the deep shag carpet.
and that's where I was like, we need to invite them because after we had kind of met
Uh-huh.
him, we were like, this is going to be a kooky night. Like we need more
Distraction.
people to spread out the attention. Yes. And then we saw you guys randomly
Oh,
in the
that's so
grocery store.
awesome.
And then that was when we said, hey, like let's put this together. And we kind of got we got stuff to make burgers, I believe.
And homemade mayonnaise.
And yeah, oh dude, that was another thing. That was another thing where I taste our mayonnaise, and I was like, "What is this? Like, what world is this in where you're in some cluttered house and this guy's telling you to touch his like to eat his mayonnaise, and they want to like inspect your feet, and my God, and he's like the head of the
It was
curling out there
crazy.
in the
Yeah, it's just
desert.
it kind of came one after the, and he had the cat named the Dude from The Big Lebowski.
Yeah,
So funny. And I don't remember exactly what his shirt read. I would love to remember. I just said it in the telling of the story. I just said that it said I used to have superpowers till my psychiatrist took them away. But it seemed appropriate.
yeah. It If you told me that's what it was, I would say
I think it
100%.
may well have been. I don't know. It's a pretty popular one. But
Yeah,
yeah. So we
I
escaped
mean,
Wrightwood. I sent you
honestly,
guys a message the next day to make sure that you weren't like behind the wood paneling walls.
I
And
know.
then we were shooting for 27 that day, and we were worried about a cache up top. Somebody said it had been contaminated, but it was fine. And then we were shooting for 27 to Cajon, or 25 or whatever it was. I don't remember, but we didn't make it because Monica's feet were killing her. And I don't remember when you came by us. I know you came by right about the time her feet started hurting. And were you able to tell that we were in a bad way when you passed? Do you remember?
I could I could tell I could tell she was a little bit
Yeah.
gingerly limping a little bit because your kids always want to
Uh-huh.
push. Like I could tell because Henry was so far ahead and he had his hands in his pockets and his body language was like
He
I
was
want to
so mad.
go. Well, and so I had a few more miles to do. I got off earlier that day. So I had to go from like right by
Yeah,
Baden
that's right.
Powell all the way to
You had to
Islip
start a couple
Saddle
miles back. Yeah.
to meet. Yeah. And so then Dawn went into Dawn got a different ride and met me there, and we had water and stuff. We carried so much water, and just to get up there and find water up at the cache. Yeah, and then we were trying to push and get up to you guys, and then yeah, that was when Dawn and I always. This is a vivid memory for Dawn and I. We passed you guys. We're like, where's Henry? Like he's up there, and we could see him down those long switchbacks, and he was just strolling, had his hands in his pockets, just taking it easy. And Don and I are like, all right, let's catch him. And so like we start pushing. We're hiking as fast as we can. And we're both over 6 feet tall and fast hikers. And he wasn't getting closer. Like we're pushing, we're pushing, we're pushing. Henry's just same distance away. And so we start getting like a little bit of a little skip in our step and trying to get a little jog here and there. And we finally get up to him. And that was when I gave him June's MP3 player. And we were just like, after that, we were both like, this kid is a machine. He's 13 at the time.
He's
How tall is he
6'5"
now?
now. Yeah.
I mean, he's got to be a hiking like phenom at this point. I mean, he is because he just had the mentality too, like that kind of like I don't care, I don't want to be
Yeah,
here, but I really love
exactly.
it
That's exactly
kind
right.
of mentality. Like I'm not going to tell anybody how much I'm enjoying this because it's easier to be like,
That's right.
because he was such a strong hiker. I mean, all your kids are strong hikers. I can only imagine how fast of a hiker Georgie is now that she's not 11 years old because she
Yeah.
just
We
turned
went to, yeah, that's right.
18.
She just turned 18. We went to the Great Divide Trail this summer, and she's 6 feet tall. She's 6'1" actually. So we went to the
Yeah.
Great Divide this summer and we're hiking out there. Most of the time she just spent making fun of me because I couldn't keep up with her. It was really fun. I mean, it was not fun. I was like, I'd call it like I would write notes in my phone to June, to send her later and be like, I'm so sorry for
Yeah.
everything I put you through. Like I know what it feels like now to be the slowest one, and it's terrible. And I just could not keep up with her. It's amazing. But yeah, she's a cruiser. On the uphill, I can catch her on a downhill still, but she'll fly up the hill.
It's so cool the experience that you gave your kids with this stuff. Still talk
That's
about you guys
fun.
all the time to people about just how like how well behaved and how good team players you guys all were. And obviously there's moments for everybody in a big group, especially a family and with kids. But just the amount of like Aiden was so mature, like it seemed like to me. Like she was so like a third parent kind of making sure everyone was good, or you were able to say, hey, can you go do this for me in like an adult manner for sure to go like tell Henry to hang back and make sure we stay together. And I just
Yeah.
thought it was absolutely fantastic. You guys were like
Well, it's fun.
the
Yeah.
little
What's really fun for
awesome.
me, one of the things that's really fun, it's fun especially to talk to you about it, is, one of the things people do say is your children will have gained so much from this experience. And, I quote you as saying, and I quoted you when I wrote the article for the PCTA, Pacific Crest Trail Association, in their magazine, just because I think there's something so profound that happens while you're hiking, but it is so hard to put into words. And so when I was trying to think of what to call the book, I was thinking about that conversation that we had at that water cache where you taught my kids how to yogi water in the desert.
Yeah.
And I said, you said the same thing. You said your kids will have gained so much, and I just said, what do you'll have gained it twice. And you said, yeah, I used to try to explain it to people, tell them what I'm learning out here. And I finally just gave up because I can't put it into words. And even if I could they understand it? So now I just say I've learned I'm pretty good at
Yeah.
walking. So you're the
Yeah.
reason for the title of the book, Pretty Good at Walking. And I think it's really a neat thing because
And
it's
it's so
it's
true.
one of the things in the telling of it. So one of the things I made myself do was to stay inside the knowledge base that I had at the moment that I was writing. So I wrote it chronologically, and I said, what did I know here and what didn't I know? And I can't write about what I don't know.
Hmm.
And I made that sort of rule for myself in terms of, I never said what other people were thinking because I don't really have access to that. So I tried to make rules for myself in the writing. And then it was fun in the retelling of
Hmm.
all that to rediscover some things that were there that I hadn't seen before. And so I wonder for you, are there things that as you've reflected, in particular on that hike, just because that's the one I'm, focused on, are there things that you look backward and you just say, oh yeah, I get it. I get it now.
Yeah, like when I've been such a team player my whole life with sports and everything that being alone kind of scared me at first, where I didn't like being alone. I like to be strong for someone. I like helping somebody. Someone helps me, I help them. When you're feeling down, you pick me up. When you're feeling down, I pick you up, and that makes us exponentially stronger than just us as individuals. And it was really good for me to see how I react when there's no team to be strong for, when there's
Mm-hmm.
nobody around to be strong for. When you take that kind of mask away of being around other people, what happens? Especially especially being in the pressure cooker of this, where I'm
Mm-hmm.
physically drained and exhausted. I'm frustrated at some points. I'm in pain with my shoulder and stuff. And it was kind of, where does your mind go? Because you can always, everyone knows the right answer. It's like when a coach asks a kid, like, are you supposed to play hard? And the kids go, yeah. And like, cool. Well, that's not something you answer with a word. That's something you answer with action. And so it was very eye-opening to see my strengths and my weaknesses and how I react and how resilient I really am, and how much of certain things is just not quitting
Mm-hmm.
when things
Yeah.
get hard. And I'd always think in my head, this is when other people give up. And then that would motivate me to like double down. And I feel like now I don't just like being around people, I like connection with people. Like before it was like I like to go hang out with people I necessarily don't necessarily have the best connection with them, but just people are around. It's kind of like a person version of keeping yourself busy with your cell phone instead of thinking in your own head. And it really made me go through a lot of things. Arguments I had with people years ago that maybe we hadn't talked much since, and it wasn't necessarily either person's fault, but there was some sort of stalemate of not each person not wanting to be the first person to reach out. And like those things came across to me a lot when I had hypothermia and I thought I
Mm-hmm.
was passing. Was
Like there's dissonance in the past, and I want to go fix that.
Yeah, and like thinking like how stupid it is that you're missing out on time, or for something that was dumb and years ago, and all it would take is that first step of reaching out or putting your hand out to then bring that right back into the fore of everybody, of that being completely forgotten. And just like, I don't know, like it took a little bit of my edge off of like, I don't know, I was
Mm-hmm.
very competitive my whole life with sports. I mean, like ruthlessly competitive. And it kind of didn't take that away, but it put into perspective how that can sometimes get in the way, or how sometimes that's not the right attitude for the activity at hand. In soccer, it was always like step
Yeah.
up or get the
Yeah.
heck out. Like if you're not good enough, then get off the field. Like I'm not here to goof around. If step up or leave. And to kind of get rid of
Yeah.
that a little bit, uh, realize how amazing I just missed people. Like I felt so grateful to just be around people afterwards, of like the connections I had. I started like calling people on trail and like calling some friends that we hadn't called each other in a few years. We're getting busy. He had a kid, he moved away, and just call somebody instead of texting and just check in with them 15 minutes when I had service at some point on trail. I think those are the things that I learned the most, was to be a little more soft, to be a little more honest with my emotions about like, I think you're a good friend, like we should hang out, or like letting somebody know
Yeah.
I care about them, or instead of being like a little bit more stoic, like I in the past had been, where you don't really say those things. And it kind of came to the fore, I guess, during the hypothermia stuff, where I was like, I don't want to go without people knowing these things or how I felt or um I think that would be the biggest takeaway. That and set lofty goals and stick to them. I mean, there is such confidence that comes from putting something just out of reach, you think, and then getting there. And that permeates
Yeah,
everything else in your
that's
life.
cool. That actually ties in nicely to this question that I have. Don makes a claim that you sat at the road 3 miles from the end and said the same thing that Henry said, which was, "I did what I came to do," and you threatened not to go to
Yeah.
the monument 3 miles away.
We sat at the 1 mile
Oh, it's one
marker
mile. That's okay.
and yeah, we sat at the 1 mile marker and for maybe 2 hours and it wasn't that I didn't want it to
Yeah,
end.
yeah,
I knew everything changed once I got to that. My routine every day,
yeah,
I had to go back to a different way of life. It was the simplicity of trail life had really become so attractive to me in that you're you're fit, you're healthy. Everybody you meet is the nicest version of themselves. People are inviting you into their homes. Don and I are great friends now. You meet a random friend in the desert sleeping on the side of a trail. You get trail magic. You like these these connections that you're able to have that don't happen in the real world were about to be over. Now it's not you get somewhere and something magical happens and you're at someone's backyard sitting by a creek that you didn't even know the person and you're drinking wine and eating barbecue with them. And like these things don't happen anymore in normal life. And that was like I got to the end proud of myself, but also like didn't want it to be over.
yeah,
Like I could have kept
yeah.
going
No,
forever.
I loved that about it for my kids, the sort of disparate nature of the people that they got to be exposed to and friends with. I can remember when Starter was up near, gosh, it was Crater Lake, and he and two of his friends were there at Crater Lake. They'd skip down to meet one of the friends' mother there. And we walked into the parking lot and they were like, Strawbridges. And I just thought, this is so cool. These are like people, really neat people that we would not have known how neat they were had we not shared that common an objective. There was just something, and it's so arbitrary and so meaningless on the one hand. And then on the other, it just lends so much profundity to an experience with other people. Like, it's really cool.
That's kind of the beauty of it is that like running into each other is
Hmm.
happenstance. We don't know if it's going to
Hmm.
happen again. And then especially my biggest reality check was I would walk every night after I got home because like you're just used to moving. So I would just go walk through my neighborhood at night when everybody was asleep. My neighborhood's very sleepy and quiet. 9 o'clock, there's not a car on the road. And so I would just go walk with my dog at night. And one of the hardest things for me was like holding open the door for somebody and them
Hmm.
not saying anything, or crossing somebody else walking down the street and not
Uh-huh.
making eye contact and
Uh-huh.
saying
Yeah.
hello and
Yeah.
like having a genuine interest in
Yeah.
who that
Yeah.
person was.
Whereas on the
And
trail, you almost have
and then people start looking at
like an assumption of camaraderie that's just built into the
yeah.
expectation.
And then in society, you're looked at as weird or potentially dangerous for even acknowledging someone that you don't know. And that was kind of a big, you know,
Yeah.
change
Yeah.
in shock to me in terms of how less authentic the real world is. Yeah, it's a crazy experience, especially for 8 months to go back
Yeah.
into try to go back into
Yeah.
normal life.
I messaged you after the trail to ask about transition back into soccer because of your soccer coaching experience. I don't know if you know this, but and you said, yeah, tell them just strength and agility for a couple weeks. Don't kick a ball. Of course, Henry ran out in the yard and started kicking a ball and pulled a muscle right away.
It's insane. I was on the field last night. Jeff Garmire and I went and did a 150 mile like through hike, I guess, in
Hmm.
Los Padres National Forest down here in Southern California. And my first day on the field was yesterday, and I hit a couple of balls, and I was like, "Oh, my groins! I need to go home and stretch. The muscles are totally different. I'm good for 25, 30 miles a day right now, but I cannot kick a
Awesome.
ball 5 times to a
So
10-year-old."
great. So, tell me then what, that's probably a good transition. Tell me what you're up to this summer.
This summer, I'm not sure. I had some other plans, but one of my teams is potentially going to Virginia and then going to a different type of
How old are the
ECNL
kids you're
playoff
coaching?
situation.
Okay, cool.
And so I'm not sure. My original plan was again to try to meet you guys on the
Uh-huh.
Pyrenees section of the Hector Treks. Not sure if that's going to happen. I won't even know until a
Oh,
couple weeks
okay.
ahead of time
That's
when we're
great. Probably the right way to do
in
it.
that
Play it by
qualifying
ear.
tournament. Yeah, and so, but I guarantee you I'll be doing something at some point. It just probably might not be. But yeah, I mean, right now, like I said, if anybody wants to, they can reach out to me. But I put together a 150-mile little through hike here in Southern California through Los Padres that can be done during the winter
Cool.
months and
That's
the
great
early
because
spring
winter
months. So
hiking's
Jeff and
tough
I
to come
just did
by
it.
most places.
Yeah, and it's like we followed the two national wild and scenic rivers in Southern California. Bears, mountain lions. I mean, you don't see them, but you can see the
Yeah.
tracks, deer. Like, I had one of the nights we're at this lookout tower and I had views 100 miles over the ocean, over the Channel Islands, and I could turn around and see the snowy
Oh,
Sierra
that's cool.
mountaintops. And then you could see all the way down into LA and you could
So
see all the
are
way
you
north.
taking people on trips? Or are you just going to give them the information and say good luck?
I'll just give them the information if people want
Because
it. There's
I think I saw on
sections people can do.
Jeff's Instagram there was something like about getting lost.
Yeah, so again, we one section there the trail doesn't exist and you just have to walk through the creek for a little bit. And we didn't realize that, so we both went into these bushes and then kind of got stuck for a tiny bit. And I came out thinking that Jeff was already way ahead because
Yeah.
he's always ahead of me. I'm always
Yeah.
chasing him down. And he ended up getting stuck for like an extra 20 minutes. So I got out and this is dark. So I'm running down the middle of the creek bed in the dark with my headlamp on, trying to catch Jeff, not realizing Jeff's behind me. Jeff's waiting for me, thinking that I'm behind him. And so we ended up just camping we had two campsites that we were going to choose. And he ended up stopping at the first one. And then I went to the second one thinking that he had not stopped at the first one. And then in the morning, it was like, all right, well, I'm just gonna make marks on the trail so
Yeah.
he could
Yeah.
tell. Like I was
'Cause
stomping
nobody
every
else is out there, right?
molehill with like my
Yeah.
nobody. It was just bare tracks. And so eventually I knew if I left enough tracks, if he was behind me and not dead, then he would just notice my tracks because I started moving all the leaves out of the way. Like there had been nobody there all fall. And so eventually he caught up to me and we were like, oh, thank God, I knew you'd catch me eventually. And then that was probably the hardest part of it. Like if you wanted to miss out that first 45 miles, it would make it a lot easier. But it was a pretty epic trip. I mean, swimming holes, hot
Really?
springs, second hottest hot springs in North
That's great.
America. Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. I mean, some of the only old growth ponderosa forests in like that whole mountain range of Southern California. Absolutely gorgeous. There's this place they call it the Zion of Los Padres, where you kind of walk down this narrow creek and there's huge walls with like a little like moss and lichen and stuff and nice looking cliffs and rock formations. And it's a, it's a pretty special area. Doesn't get much fanfare just based off it is a little more rugged. Like it's not easy, but I think we saw, I don't know, less than a handful of people the whole 150 miles.
Yeah, that's great.
And,
I was
and it
thinking this
was,
spring, Georgie and I ought to do some prep stuff because we're talking about going a little bit early to start the hex track. Do the lower country
yeah,
stuff. Start north, walk 500 kilometers, flip down, and then come north into the Alps there. And so, but even so, we probably would need more winter prep than we've ever done.
you're gonna,
And we haven't really done ice axes and crampons and all that stuff. So I was bugging you about that. And then I was like, man, you know what I should do? I should see what he's doing in the spring. Get a little that's coaching.
you should. Yeah, I mean, I have multiple loops of things that you guys could come do out here that would be great training that are also beautiful that can be done all year. I mean, I'm heading out this weekend to that area similar to just
That's
keep my
awesome.
legs moving and
That's awesome.
you know, there's a big herd of bighorn sheep, one of the only ones in this whole area that
Oh,
sits by that hot
really?
spring.
That's so cool.
So I'm gonna, I like to head out there and I try to run as fast as I can to down, down the trail to get there first. So you can kind of like, they all just sit there until campers
Oh,
come.
that's so
So you'll
cool.
see like 30 to 40 bighorn sheep like going head to head
Oh, that's awesome.
and sitting there and standing right next to the steamy
Yeah,
water coming off.
that's so cool.
And so, yeah, I found some areas in my area where I can really get out, and it's nice because there's almost nobody out there. It's kind of shocking
Well, especially
the
for such a populous.
the beauty that people don't even know exist. I can be looking at 5 million people, and I'm up there, and there's just animal tracks, and it's one of the most beautiful places where you got big pine trees. It looks like the forest. It looks
I
like
was
the Sierra,
fascinated when we hit the desert. Of course,
but
I'm looking for dunes and tumbleweed, Southern California, and there's none of that. But it was still amazing to come off that Mojave Basin and get up high and find all this beautiful, you know, pine and ponderosa stuff. I mean, it's just amazing that it's all there.
and that's kind of what the area is like you got like chaparral,
Hmm.
sagebrush type situation with like trees every now and then, only like the canyons. And then you go up 2,000 feet, and you got 70-foot, 60-foot ponderosa pines everywhere. You got granite sticking out everywhere, and it's an area I honestly want to promote as well because they don't have a lot of resources for trail maintenance and stuff. And so Los Padres Forest Association does a great job. I've recently gone out, Don has gone out and done trail
Cool,
work with them. They are some of the people that are they are maintaining that route that I kind of put
cool.
together. So they're out there working on that as they always are. It's not like they just started doing it because of me, but they're the ones out there actually putting in the work to make some of these amazing routes even capable out there. And if anyone in Southern California is hearing this, I would really recommend they try to volunteer with Los Padres Sports Association to, you know, open up a place because a lot of it's chaparral, and chaparral
Yeah,
grows back
that's
fast.
cool. Well, yeah, Florida, it's like maintaining the Florida Trail. Like anything, it's like you've got to do it with mowers and weed eaters. That's cool.
Exactly.
So if I was going to send people to you, where should I send them? You said they could.
Los Padres
That's
Sports Association,
you said they could get in touch with you to know about the route. Okay,
my
Instagram.
Instagram,
Okay,
if they
cool.
want.
If I can figure it out, I'll
Yeah,
put that in some show notes, as they say. But
yeah,
we'll see. But no, this
yeah.
has been so awesome. Like the idea that anybody who's read the book, listened to the book on Audible or whatever, will have encountered your name, and then they can put a face with the name and know some more of the story. Like you're the side story here that was going on all the time, doing your own amazing thing, and really impacted our journey to a significant degree. Like it was no small thing that we ran into when we did for our sake and for and just encouragement. And I know especially for Henry. Henry's just like, Dad, he coaches soccer with the LA Galaxy. Did you know that?
Well, and that's the thing is, of all the beautiful things I saw, some of the things I take away the most are the connections with you guys, seeing you guys 3 times on trail and having that, like, I don't even know how to explain it, like we were talking about earlier, of like when you turn a corner and you see someone that you wanted to see but you didn't expect to see them on trail, that kind of like where we yell out to you guys down by the
Yeah,
empty water cache and we're like, yeah, and we all see each other and we all give each other hugs. And again, just that ability to have a real genuine connection
yeah,
that quickly
yeah.
with a group of people is something that sticks out the most for my trail. And your family is probably number one in terms of groups of people that I met that were just at the right time. All three of our interactions were just absolutely fantastic. Whether it was in the Sierra on a negative note where we were all struggling, or like at a great Mexican restaurant, you meeting my parents and having a good meal, or
me watching all your guys' feet get scrubbed down by some old lady and me somehow is getting out of it. All those things just honestly make
Yeah.
it what it was. And so I
Yeah.
really appreciate you guys taking me in that day as your guys' fifth child.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, man. This has been an absolute ball for me to get through.
No problem. Well,
Yeah,
let's
you
talk
got
again
it.
soon, even if it's not on
All
tape.
right, man. Thanks a lot. See ya.
All right. See ya.
Thank you for listening to this, our first episode of Pretty Good at Talking. If you enjoyed what you heard here, go ahead and get yourself a book of Pretty Good at Walking. They're available at Amazon. You can get them there in paperback or in Kindle form. Also available in audio version at Audible. So if you prefer to read your books while walking, read your books about walking while walking, take off and get it there. Again, thanks, and we'll see you next time.